I think what I do is kind of really simple. I make work about activists. Wow, thank you. It's like a physical, you know, comedy up here. Okay, I make work about activists, and I'm really simply like the arts committee. Like, I'm trying to visualize slogans, you know, and am I in the wrong place? Am I okay? Okay, and like bear witness. Like, literally, sometimes activists are so busy and so overwhelmed that nobody documents what they do. So that's pretty much what I'm doing for my practice. So I'm kind of obsessed with slogans. I like the idea of simple slogans for complex people. And I feel like grief and hope right now kind of identifies what I've been feeling for a really long time. And I've been reading a lot about eco-grief, and it's actually a thing, environmental grief. And I've been experiencing it for a long time, but I ignore it. So, you know, when you see that forest burning, or you hear about that animal going extinct, or that tree being cut down, you just, you know, you feel intense grief and you bury it. And I think it's important that we start to acknowledge it. So today's talk is going to have a lot to do with grief, but that at the same time, I still feel a lot of hope. I got to find hope. So I think I'm finding hope in young activists. And also, that's what I'm going to try to show you today. 3 examples of that are in my practice. Okay, so I got to work this remote. Okay, so I was just in Europe and Germany traveling around, and there were a lot of shows about post-humanism. I thought I was going to go back to the States and read all about it. Instead, I became obsessed with 1970s ecofeminism. But I do love this ecofeminist kind of, I think this is like really helped me rethink how I move through the world, to stop thinking about non-human beings and the earth as resources, and start to think about them as like relatives. The world, the earth is not out there, we are part of it. So this like chart has just like really been, this graphic has been stuck in my head, and I'm really grateful for it. Okay, so, this helps, 2013. In 2013, there was this, I live in Los Angeles, and I've been following tree sitters around since the 90s. Does anybody know what a tree sitter is? Okay, some of you. Okay, so I live really close to Northern California, and we have those beautiful redwood old growth trees that particularly in the 80s, were just being mined, just like cut down. Like, they're so wide, and it's really crazy because they grow in this magical circle sometimes. It's incredible. So I became obsessed with tree sitting. And so you climb in the tree. I know people who've lived in trees for 2 and 3 years, And so I like the physicality of it too. But so I became really good friends with this tree sitter, John Quigley. I met him not far from Cal Arts. He spent 4 months in a tree trying to save a 400-year-old oak. And he climbed into it, and it became like all the children fell in love with it. It became an international kind of story. And he saved the tree, but they actually dug it up and moved it. They had to move the tree for an as of yet it was a non-permitted housing development to widen a road. And they dug up that 400-year-old tree and moved it for millions of dollars across the street. But he saved it. Anyway, he and I have become really good friends. I think he's at my house right now. So he calls me up one night, and he's like, okay, 4 in the morning, I need you to go in with me. We're going into this woodlands. It's the last straw. They're going to cut it down. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't exercised in like 2 months. Like, this is going to be really hard. But I was trained as a tree sitter. He trained me. And this is it. This is the Arcadia Woodlands. So this is what we would call an urban wilderness area. This was on the edge, the outskirts of the city of Los Angeles. And it was owned by the county, and it was probably filled with 200 to 300-year-old sycamore and oak trees. And it had been untouched. I had never walked on soil like that no one had ever been on. So we have these, in LA, I think it's famous in the movies, those concrete rivers. And they were, his name, anyway, this guy who was like the head of the county or whatever for that area, he decided he was gonna make money. So this area is a bowl shape. You know, the trees are kind of like in a bowl shape. So he decided that he was gonna clear cut all of them so that the soot and sand that isn't properly flowing to the ocean, it could be dredged and dumped in this area, and then once it was filled, they would build a housing development on top. That was the idea. Ridiculous. So anyway, at 4 a.m, we went in. I had never done this before. This is just, so I planned on a lot of things. I was like, will I be there for 4 months or will I be there for a day? What I never expected to happen was that they cut down the entire forest around us. It was the most grief I had ever felt, and I'm a cynical person in a certain way. It was so loud and violent, and then as an artist loving materials and beautiful materials, they were oak trees. Really old oak trees. They stuck them in wood chippers and ground them up. So there were like probably 20 sheriffs under us. 4 of us went in at 4 a.m., snuck in, climbed in trees, put platforms in it, like little basically doors that you hang, that you can sit on, and like basically chained ourselves to the tree. They discovered us about 7 a.m. And they shot video of us, which kind of was great because I was able to get the video during the court hearing and use it in my artwork. Oops. So this is John Quigley. He and I have become, he's one of my dearest friends, but he is a professional tree sitter, and he's taught me everything. The problem with our tree sit was that the forest was so grand and the neighborhood could not get to us. So they kept out the media, they kept out the supporters, so they could really do to us whatever they wanted. So this is what it looked like. So they didn't cut the trees, they took bulldozers and smashed them over. That's me being really stressed out. And they just dug up the whole land. So there were 2 other people, these are out of order. There were 2 other people in a distant tree, Travis and Julia. So eventually at night they came in after they had torn down the whole forest and put it all in wood chippers, and they arrested us. And that's Julia in handcuffs, getting taken away. This is when the search and rescue guys came up to get me. I kept my camera going to the very end. He's not happy with me. But that's what it looked like at the end. A total clear cut. So this was extreme grief for me. I spent more time in jail than I spent in the tree. So I was in the tree I was in jail for 2 days. They didn't want us out until they were totally done. So that's Travis. He was one of the other. I got this from the police footage. He's crying. Okay. And then I did a show about it. I showed the footage, the video, in a show at Capitan Petzel. So I went back in once I was arrested illegally because I was told I couldn't do that. And I took a pickup and I filled it with as many of the chopped up trees as I possibly could. And I created these kind of I tried to monumentalize the tree. And so I used the carabiners, what is that called? P-cord that you use when you climb. Like in the tree, if you don't tie something to you, it falls and the police take it. The sheriffs take it. So it could be your toilet paper, it could be your notes, it could be your phone. So everything, it's all about gravity. Gravity is one of the things artists think about all the time when we're making sculptures. So this show is all about gravity. And then Travis, who's a really famous Northern California tree sitter, when he needed money, he would come to my house and we would go find recycled materials and we'd kind of make these Pimp My Ride. Remember that show where you make these really hot cars? We'd make Pimp My Ride tree sitting platforms. So that's one of them, because I love craft, and his knot tying is exceptional. You know, like, it's so beautiful. No one can tie knots like this man. So I was like, I wanted to learn. So, like, he and I would spend hours tying knots in my studio to make these, you know, kind of things. That was the video. And then to pay for my arrest, or to pay for my legal fees, I made a self-portrait of my, when I got arrested, my photo, my mugshot. Okay, so this, so in April 2016, I'm like really bad at stating facts. I'm going to read you something really quickly about Standing Rock. So a lot of people here don't know what Standing Rock is. Standing Rock is in South Dakota, and it's a reservation. And in 2016, there were protests in Standing Rock in South Dakota where there was a reaction to the building of an oil pipeline through the Standing Rock Sioux tribe's land. The pipeline crossed under two rivers the Standing Rock Sioux rely on to drink. So there's the Missouri River and I think it's the Cheyenne River, and literally we're building pipelines under these beautiful rivers. And so the tribes came together and just like made a call out for, you know, like, and they just started, a camp started. And the tribes in the area all came together, and then from that, and it was like, so the activists were on one side. So this is how big it got. When I got out there, there were 15,000 people. And it was it was the most peaceful alternative. I mean, it's freezing. You all know about cold here. Like, everyone's 15,000 people living in tents and cars and all sorts of, you know, and everyone has to be fed. Everyone has to be educated. You know, you have to have peaceful resolutions. And it was like the most amazing experience of my life. So I, of course, went out there thinking that I was going to make all this art about it, and then I realized that I needed to step back and shut up and just learn, because I knew nothing. So basically what happened was Obama actually received so much pressure that he actually stopped the pipeline, and I was out there the day it happened. And it was amazing. And so it was a real victory. But then when the Trump got in office, the first thing he did, like literally on day one, was make sure those pipelines were drilled. So one of the amazing things that I became really obsessed with was that the youth, it was really a youth-run movement, nonviolence, youth-run, and they became obsessed and really good at flying drone cameras, because the only way to spy on, because the company that was doing the drilling was not adhering to, you know, they were often told to stop drilling, and they were doing it anyway. So the youth were flying drones over to like see what was going on. So in this video so anyway, I fell in love. The first person I met when I got there was this, one of the leaders of the movement, Chase Iron Eyes, and I was blown away by his intelligence and his humor. And I also found out that he had a 12-year-old daughter who was like so articulate and amazing. And my dream was to like someday meet her. And over the last 4 years, she now comes to my house. I love this kid. And so I did it's a 55-minute video, because the thing about activists is they're always interviewed for sound bites. They never get to tell a more long and complex story, and I feel like that's something that I can do. So this video, which whether we see it today or not, it's on Vimeo under My Name Means Future. And Toccata, I asked Toccata to take me to her most sacred favorite spots in the landscape in South Dakota. And we just drove around for 4 days. And it was with friends, all artists, all activists. And she gets to tell a long story. So yeah, and she is working, she is one of the leading youth activists. Disney just made her a new superhero character, which is crazy. And she's going to a school. She's finally gotten into a good school because the reservation, she lives on Pine Ridge Reservation. Her mom is the head of the kind of like medical clinic there, and her dad is a lawyer and a spokesperson for the tribes. And they're brilliant people, but I guess the one thing I should talk about is that the overlap between feminism, indigenous rights, and environmentalism. I know there's been a lot of problems with the overlap of these ideas, a kind of intersectionality. There's been a frustration with that I've been hearing since I've been here. But I just want to kind of talk, since we can't see the video, about how it plays out. So in the United States, the indigenous lands have the most resources. They have the majority of the resources in our country. So the government is going in and extracting the resources. The men who are coming to extract those resources are raping, murdering, disappearing the women. Her auntie was disappeared, and they didn't find her body for like 2 or 3 months. So it's a real problem that nobody's really talking about. So, it just deals with all of these issues. There was just a lead article in the LA Times yesterday about this issue. When I talk about this, or when Tokata talks about it on the film, no one believes it. They think it's a myth. So I think that's like the most important thing I can talk about with this. So what else? I mean, what do you want me to do? I mean, I'd like to talk about one more thing. I had video. So on my new piece, which I haven't made an artwork about, is in my home. I'm from one of the Great Lakes. I had pictures of it because I don't even know if everyone knows where that is. I'm from Ohio. It's kind of the middle of nowhere, but it's one of the most beautiful Great Lakes in the world. And I literally grew up like 4 or 5 houses from it. And I've been so I still go home all the time. I was home last week and slept in the bed I grew up in. Nothing changes there. But there's this problem that my dad and my family have been talking about for a while, and they call it algae bloom. And what's happening is that, I come from farming people, but no one farms anymore. You rent your land to corporate farmers. So in the state of Ohio, and we have this system of small streams that go to rivers that go out into the lake. And so what's happening is it's literally the corporate farms are either growing they're raising too much cattle, too many pigs, too many chickens, and the manure, or the corporate farms that are growing corn and soybean are using too much manure, and it's going into the lake, and the phosphates and nitrogen are causing this algae bloom that will kill a dog if you swim in it. And it's getting into all the water systems along the lake. So Toledo, for instance, and this is typical, it got into their water system. Toledo's a really big town in Ohio. You may not know that, but it's a really big city. And it got into their water system. So the Toledo government reported it at 2 a.m. So no one saw it. So everyone got up the next morning, washed their face, brushed their teeth, made coffee. So hundreds of citizens got really sick. And it took a really long time. So there's these Toledoans for Safe Water and these 2 amazing activists that I just met, Marky and Tish. But what they've done, and I think it's going to spread throughout, this is where the hope comes in. They've started a Lake Erie, a Bill of Rights. So it's a nature Bill of Rights. And so it's almost giving personhood to nature. And if anybody wants to see it, I have copies of this stuff. You can read it later if you want. But I think this is something we can do. And now it's spreading to different towns throughout Ohio, throughout the United States, and throughout the world. Different communities are coming together and voting for a Bill of Rights for what's important in their community. Like there should be a Bill of Rights for these mountains. And they're fighting it right now because the giant, like BP is fighting it, giant corporations, and the government is, their local government is supporting the corporations. But I think that this is really exciting. So yeah, I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you want me to do, you all?